Shikanoin Heizou is an anemo 4-star hailing from Inazuma. Another anemo boy to add to the collection. Another addition to the anemo boy band swirl. And another underwhelming 4-star released by your one and only Hoyoverse. This is a contradiction of Shikanoin Heizou. Fuck. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, YouTube. It's your Slime King, the Gym Man, and welcome to another video. Before we get into why exactly does Heizou feel underwhelming, first let's talk about what makes him good and what made people have somewhat high expectations for the first male catalyst ever in Genshin Impact. Heizou is an anemo catalyst unit. That alone makes him good. His access to VV and very high multipliers on his skill make him a clear-cut DPS with an emphasis on his capability to drive teams because he can proc swirl continuously and provide hefty damage to boot. He has good single target damage and his animations are fast and fluid. He is also very fun to play, especially with his combos. However, it is his element that makes him good and nothing else can truly be derived from what's perceived as amazing in his kit. Once you brush past the initial excitement from playing him, everything comes bubbling to the surface. There's a laundry list of things that make Heizou a worse unit as compared to his counterparts. The number one culprit is his lack of crowd control. As an anemo, barring Sayu and Jin, who are mainly occupying the anemo healer niche, every other anemo has a form of crowd control. Of course, Xiao doesn't have one, but he doesn't need it, thanks in part to his overwhelming AoE. But Heizou lacks in both these departments. His AoE, even with C2, is mediocre at best, and makes the pain of positioning Sucrose's CC godly in comparison. He doesn't have the same AoE that Xiao has to compensate, and what you're left with is a middling unit that merely outperforms his counterparts only in single target. He also suffers from having a low base attack by virtue of being a 4-star. This means that even if his multipliers are high, it's not as good at first glance because what uses crit if your base damage is so low anyway? Of course, attack buffers such as Ben and Sarah could remedy this. However, that severely limits teams you can run him in as his main source of damage. Another one of his bigger weaknesses is his skill uptime. At a 10-second cooldown, this can only be performed once per rotation, and thus the combination of your burst and skill while good damage is not sustained enough to actually feel good in actual play. Like I said, his multipliers are low, and so his normal attacks hit lower than Kokomi in her burst form, and thus his damage drops off significantly during his downtime. Of course, you are enabling other units in your team as the driver, but at that point, there are better alternatives. And this leads to his greatest problem, his build. Heizou can choose from two builds, a crit VV build or a full EM VV build. And this is where the contradiction in this detective's kit rears its ugly head. You see, going for a crit build will wholly utilize his very strong multipliers on his skill and burst, but the trade-off that in the downtime, your normal attacks aren't doing anything. But if you go the EM route, your swirls will deal significantly more damage, especially in AoE, thus increasing the value of your normal attacks, but reducing your skill and burst damage to meaningless. There is no perfect balance of increasing both avenues of damage, and thus you have to choose a path that's not the best either way. And this is what makes Heizou feel underwhelming, is that you can't maximize what makes anemo drivers so good. It's applying VV and dealing massive swirl damage at the same time. Instead, you have to choose between swirl damage or crit damage. It's that sense that you are not fully utilizing Heizou to the best of his capability. It's because he is an emo, a great driver, and the potential of swirl that makes it feel off that even if it's obvious you go the crit route because of his high multipliers and his attention stat being 24% anemo damage, you can't help but feel as though something is missing. Sucrose does not have this problem simply because her multipliers are jack shit anyway. Her skill provides better grouping and ability to gooba swirl, and overall she requires less investment. Her kit feels like you are making the most of it because of how it synergizes so well with her build. But with Heizou, there's this numbing contradiction that sweeps through, and that no matter how fun he feels to play, his role as a driver just isn't what it should feel like. Shikanoin Heizou is another example of a character that has design decisions made implicitly to make him feel inferior to other units. He has merely solidified what type of 4-star Hoyoverse will keep on releasing. Characters that on paper look good but have some glaring issues that make them merely side grades to other units. Heizou is better at single target than Sucrose, and that is where his niche lies. He also performs well in double and emo setups, but not as good as Venti. He is good in national variations and taser variations, especially in single target. More options is better, but he is still an underwhelming unit considering the potential he could have had if his kit was a little more cohesive with what a Nemo wanted to be. Do you agree the new 4-stars are underwhelming, or do you think they are just fine? Come at me over at twitch.tv/thejimaman, where I stream Genshin almost every day. Come, join the Slime Kingdom Discord where I feed you slime condensate every day. This is our parting. Farewell.